Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Fundamentalists podcast. My name is Elliott Morgan, and I'm here with my very special guest, Dr. Peter Rollins.
Hello.
Dr.
I'm a very special guest because I'm here every week.
Single week, and if you're not, there's no podcast.
Yeah.
This is a podcast where we explore the possibility of life before death, which is a fun little catchy thing, a fun catchy way of saying, hey, life's weird. Let's talk about how weird things are. And last week, if this goes up in the order that we have done the recordings in, we talked about socialism. And so if you ever had any questions on what socialism is, guess what? Now you probably have even more. I have a little bit of a looser understanding of what it is, but we mentioned in that podcast talking about another word that everybody likes to throw around right now constantly, that everyone seems to think they understand what it means, that for a brief moment I would like to chat with you about, Pete. That word's fascism.
Fascism.
It seems to me,
Yep.
I don't believe that you are a fascist.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that.
But I do think...
But a lot of people say that I am.
Right. I've read your Twitter mentions.
Yes.
I do think when you disagree with me,
Yeah.
or tell me how I'm wrong, then you are a fascist.
Yes. Yeah.
Basically, anyone disagrees with is a fascist.
Yeah.
But you can disagree with someone and they can still be a fascist. That's
Yeah.
a little lesson Freud taught me, Pete.
What was that? Oh, you could.
Hold on, I'll get it. You can disagree with someone and they can still be a fascist.
Yeah. That is true.
Because you can be paranoid and your wife can still be cheating on you.
I mean, fascism is being called a fascist might be like being called a communist in the McCarthy era, in that it's a word that's thrown about a lot, but not really necessarily understood.
Exactly.
Very much,
It means so many things.
Yes.
And
it means I don't like you.
yes.
Yeah.
And you are out to get me, which I think is another interesting angle that we could come at from this.
Yeah.
Because the way that the word is being used right now is crazy.
Yeah.
Everyone is a fascist, and fascism this and fascism that. But I will say, I have felt in recent months like the criticisms that I would shrug off of our current administration, I'm not shrugging off so much anymore. I will say, though, only in the recent months. I feel like it has been a word that's been used so melodramatically that for me it's lost a lot of poignancy. But now that I'm learning a little bit more about what it means, I feel like it's a little bit more applicable. But before we get on to my little opinions on all this, what's your hot take on fascism, Pete?
Okay, yeah. And me,
What
worried.
does fascism mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about all sides at the moment. So yeah, I was thinking about this. That I think there's a psychological definition, and then there's the economic definition, and then there's a philosophical definition. Those are three anyway that I was thinking about, and I think most people mean when they say fascist the psychological dimension. So I guess what you're saying is, a fascist is someone who is prone to authoritarianism, nationalism, and identitarianism.
Okay.
So, and that's definitely one of the main ways in which I think fascist, and I don't think that is actually, that could almost be the personality type of people who are prone to fascism, is they're prone to authoritarianism, prone to nationalism, prone to identitarianism.
And prone to authoritarianism doesn't necessarily, I'm assuming, mean that they are prone to be authoritarian themselves. They just are prone to feel most comfortable in an environment in which there is an authoritarian figure calling the shots.
Like kind of critique of democracy in a way, because that brings to the philosophical one, is that, fascists are not democratic.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more. In fact, Mussolini's interesting in this. Mussolini was like, the state is the will of the people. Just like, so the state is a body, like a physical body, and there's lungs and hearts, and it all works together, and the head kind of controls everything, and everything goes to the head and comes from the head. And a good society runs like an organism. Mm-hmm. And then Mussolini would say that, and if it's not working well, what will happen is the people will rise up and violently overthrow the government, and they'll institute their system. And if they don't do that, well, they don't care enough.
Isn't that funny?
So it's
that's such a fun. Well, if you don't like it, change it.
Yeah, and he kind of really rejoiced in violence in a way. Like he said that
Bring it on.
Yeah, he says the will of the people. If it's not working, they will. They'll come up. They'll fight. They'll overthrow. But It's not very
if the
democratic.
will of the people have been so defeated as a result of living in an authoritarian society that they lack the ability to rise up. I mean,
Well, he says they just will lack the will. Then the will isn't there. Like whenever you're downtrodden enough, if the system isn't working. Well, this is just Mussolini, but he is obviously one of the big fascists. But yeah, he was like
top
well,
5, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. In your trump cards, your fascist trump cards that
Yes.
you've got. He would just go like, it's not democracy. That doesn't change things. It's violence and violently overthrowing.
So he's like openly defending fascism?
Yeah, Mussolini was a fascist. And
Am I like is it just growing up in America that you just learn even the word itself sounds terrible?
So it's terrible. Yeah,
And what you're describing, even though it's obviously Mussolini doing it, it's still kind of like, it's so much more innocuous than the like feeling I get when I say the word.
Yeah. Well, one of the thinkers is a guy called Gentile, which is funny because he's to be gentle. Gentile, Italian fascist. His argument, fascism philosophically, is simply the idea of, here's how I would define it, being thrown a little bit on the spot, not knowing we were going to do this. So,
I mean, yeah.
But
all the credit, give all the leeway.
Yes, thank you. Is that fascism is an attempt to regulate capitalism and to avoid the class warfare of socialism. So basically, as a philosophical position, fascism is an attempt to basically save capitalism by regulating it highly, but making it served by the state, but it's still privately owned. So it's just the state comes in and regulates and
Chase
holds
Bank.
up. Chase Bank, is that?
Or any of the major banks that have been, bailed out.
Bailed out, yes,
propped
yeah.
up by the state.
That's it. Like fascism usually grows at the point when, like in 1929, like the fall of an economy, fascists come in and kind of prop up capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a form, and the idea is that for the sake of the nation. And then they want to avoid the class warfare of socialism. So the idea is that we're a body, everybody has a place in the body. The leader is the will of the people. And if there's some group that are kind of not working in line with the body, they're a cancer and they have to be cut out.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's fascism. It is philosophically and economically. So economically, fascism is a form of regulated capitalism.
I mean, I get all that. I guess it just seems like it always comes with a fascist. Like it seems to always have the person,
Yeah.
a singular person. In our case, it would be Trump. In historical cases, it would be the Mussolinis. And
If he is, I don't think Trump is
Right.
a fascist, but I'm interested that people do. I hear that said
it's
a
a
lot.
commonly used
Yeah.
thing or name against him.
Yeah.
I mean, whether he is.
Oh yes, well
or
I
not,
don't know. That's the thing. I'm a structuralist, so as a structuralist, I always remain kind of agnostic, not knowing the inner intentions of people. But structurally speaking, I don't think America is fascist. That's the way I should say it, actually.
But what would you call it, though, when we're continuously propping up these huge businesses to keep everything from falling? We're using the government and taxpayer dollars to basically, would that kind of fit the bill, though?
I mean, that's an argument that people like Richard Wolff, this good economist I like, he kind of says that America could potentially fall into fascism if capitalism completely collapsed in America and then was highly regulated by an authoritarian government.
What's going on right now that would lead anyone to think that our economy completely collapsed and there might be an authoritative person in power? But that kind of fits.
Yeah, but I worry because on all sides, and this isn't the problem, like on all sides there are people who are questioning the legitimacy of democracy, and that is a problem. Whatever side does it, whenever people start to question the legitimacy of democracy. But America's got so many checks and balances. So I'm born from Ireland. I've only been here for 8 years. But from the outside, I'm always surprised when people talk about it. Americans talk about America being in danger of fascism. I'm like, no, I'm from Europe, and I've seen, or I've read historically about fascist countries, and
Do you think it's our size? Do you think we're just too big?
And also have lots of great checks and balances and lots of great institutions. And I think the independent spirit of Americans belief in democracy, I'd be very surprised.
That's what I get confused on, just to get political for a second. There is this sentiment that, Trump has to defeat Biden, because if Biden gets elected, then we're going to be living in a socialist state immediately. We're going to be Venezuela.
When Biden is neoliberal, that's my main issue. Is there's no difference economically between the parties.
But
anyway, sorry.
What is truth? If the narrative is this.
Yes, no, 100%.
Then so they're going like, it's going to be a socialist state. It's going to be Venezuela, and I'm like, but this is America, and we are. One of the things I love so much about being an American is that we do have this weird rebelliousness against the government that seems to be kind of bred into everyone. It seems like we all kind of are like, I don't want to. I mean, regardless of whether you like who the president is, Americans have a tendency to revolt against things that they don't like. We're very stubborn. I think that's a very cool quality about us for the most part.
I love it, America. I love driving through America, and especially small, like in the middle of the country, and there's just this real independence that's just fantastic.
Just wonderful.
And it's in your movies, old movies, not the new ones, but all these old American movies.
Yeah.
Like that John Wayne style kind of thing.
The Americana stuff, even like the beatnik stuff, all that stuff, like the American culture is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't get enough credit for how cool it at least used to be.
Yeah.
That sounds like a get off my lawn type of moment. But in my mind, when it comes to the idea of fascism and socialism and all that stuff, because what was the scale you said last week? It was like, let me get through this. I want to know what that was also. But like, I don't know what the fear is. Because if something goes bad in this country, we have a tendency to fix it. And so if there is a situation, say, where there could be something we do to get people more health care, and people go, well, that's just going to lead us into socialism / communism / all this stuff, isn't it worth discussing at least a little bit to be like, well, why don't we just try it? And then if that starts to happen, we will go full American on the situation, and we'll make sure people can keep their health care, but we're not going to fall into that kind of state. Like, I feel like that's a pretty reasonable position, but it doesn't seem like people want that. They have a very pessimistic, almost hopeless view of what, or powerlessness, and it's ironic that it tends to come from the more patriotic sect of the country.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when...
That sounded like I had a real important point to make there.
That was great.
There's a pause there, like, let's reflect.
Well, let's think about that.
Wow, deep.
I like it. But yeah, whenever capitalism starts to fail, I guess nationalism and socialism become live options. And then the extreme form of nationalism is fascism, the extreme form of socialism, you could call it communism, but maybe Stalinism. But so that's the use those terms. So the extreme form of socialism, Stalinism. The extremist form of nationalism is fascism, and those are the two options that come up whenever capitalism starts to fail. Also, then there's maybe Keynesianism, which is a form of kind of like propping up capitalism in a less aggressive. So that's what I think's happening, is that there are some people who are drawn more to socialism at the moment, because of certain problems, certain discontent within capitalism, alienation within the workplace, financial instability. All of this was all happening. Then COVID comes along, et cetera, et cetera. So some people are being more drawn to socialism, and then some of them become what's called tankies. Tankies are like socialists who want to, get the tanks in. Like kind of Stalinists, and usually they're like that because they're safe. To be a tanky is to be like, very aggressive on a keyboard. But anyway, some people are becoming tankies, and some people are thinking just about socialism as democracy in the workplace. And then some people are becoming more nationalistic, which is not necessarily a bad thing in itself, but that's more on the right. And then some of them are becoming more fascistic. Yeah, I think that's how it's playing out.
Yeah, and the conservative, I think it's a certain sense of nationalism, I think is beautiful and wonderful and very fun. But it's interesting that it's on the right, because it's a small, the Republican thing is like small government. But
I find it really weird.
More and more.
Yeah, when I first moved to America, I found it so weird when you guys put out American flags and stuff, because back where I live, if you put out a British flag or an Irish flag, it was an incredibly aggressive statement. It was probably similar to somebody putting up one of those, what's that very controversial flag in America?
Oh, the rebel flag.
Rebel flag. It would be like putting up a rebel flag, Confederate flag. But so when I came to America, I saw these flags. It was very weird, and then I had to learn that, that's just a pride of what America is at its best.
And even the rebel flag is highly accepted.
What's that?
The Confederate flag still is highly accepted.
It's highly accepted in some areas.
Yeah. I mean, it's very. They love that thing.
Yeah. And then is the contrast happening? Like, is it more unacceptable in some places to fly even an American flag?
Oh, yeah.
Just a regular American flag?
I think it's weird here.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
I would have thought in LA it would be now weird,
what I mean. Dude, you know what I've noticed is I'll get on Zillow to look at houses a boy can dream. And so many of them, even in LA, put an American flag outside of their thing. And I think it's like it's a salesman-y type of thing to do. It's smart. I think it's a way to stage a house. But I was on my way this morning. I was going to the west side, and I passed. It's on like San Vicente. There's this whole park, and the sidewalk is covered in all of these tents, same type of tents. Where all this, it's like a homeless, little tiny city basically. Not unlike what's the street that's here? I'm blanking on the street here. In LA, downtown LA.
Skid Row?
Skid Row, yeah. Not unlike that, but every tent had a giant American flag hanging on it. And every tent was the same. And I was like, that's so weird. And I didn't understand it. I was like, what? I was like, clearly it's given. And what's the message? It doesn't, I don't know if it's giving the message it's intended to give.
Yeah.
American flag, American flag, American flag. Just rampant homelessness, crazy homelessness, and it made me a little sad. I was like, there's a problem. We have a problem.
Yeah. And that's the issue. Like, the issue I would say, is that when capitalism, which it goes through every like 7 or odd years, is when capitalism goes through a crisis, that discontent can go towards, as I say, it can go towards fascism, or it can go towards kind of like an extreme form of kind of communism.
Yeah.
And I think it's all a sign of like something's not working. It's a sign that something's not working, and people are looking for an answer to it. Mm-hmm. And fascism's definitely one of the answers. So who was it? He said, Walter Benjamin, I think, said that fascism is always the evidence of a failed revolution. Right? There's been a failure in kind of helping the people, and that failure is evidenced by the rise of authoritarianism, nationalism, militarism, identitarianism, are all of the red flags.
All right, Pete.
Right.
Let's play a game.
Mm-hmm.
You're building a society.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you get a town about the size of LA, little tiny village called Los Angeles.
Right.
No,
bigger
but
than the whole of Northern Ireland.
Let's say you have a city of a whole of Northern Ireland, right? How many people is that? 17?
1.5
with your family? Who is it?
In Northern Ireland, 1.5 million.
1.5 million? Okay,
but I think so, around that. Yeah.
What do you do? Brand new. You can build buildings fully formed. It's
like Sims. We're playing Sims.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
What kind of government? What kind of thing? What's the best option?
Right.
And you can have as much fun with this as you want. So I'm going fascism out of the gate because I want all the power.
Right. Yeah. Well, everyone likes to be a bit of a dictator.
It's a little fun. It's fun. Yeah.
So,
Why not?
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, well,
you would have democracy in the workplace. Place, right?
Yeah. I like that idea, but I understand why people are skeptical, because it sounds like, oh my goodness, people have to vote on everything. But I go, no. It's just, I would like to see the surplus value that's made by a country going to the people who created that surplus value. That's it in some way. Yeah. That's my main. I think that's the future. I think democracy, like, you could almost think of the history of civilization as the expansion of democracy into more and more areas of life. But of course, there are limits. Like, you don't want democracy in your family whenever you got a 5-year-old kid. Nope.
You're
not, the four of you aren't going to vote on what you're going to eat for dinner.
Absolutely not.
Right? Because if there's more kids, you're going to be eating chocolate every night.
Well, the kid's going to want vegetables, and I'm going to be like, we have Cinnamon Toast Crunch for dinner. You know that. So, yeah, I think if you had a perfect society, you would have a democracy. It would be a socialist democracy. Would that be the best case scenario?
Yeah, that's a way to say it. I mean, the ultimate vision is, you get to a point. Well, yeah, no, that's social democracy.
Is that kind of the most succinct, and that's different than democratic socialism? Or is it? I don't know.
That's democratic socialists are generally that's what they're aiming towards, is democracy at work. I mean, some socialists don't, aren't into that. I can't quite work out why not, because I don't look into it enough. There's a guy I respect a lot called Benjamin Studebaker, and I don't think he likes that approach, and he's very, very good on this stuff.
Yeah. There's a guy I respect named Benjamin Shapiro. He's very, very into socialism. There's three different types of fascism. We have the psychological, the emotional,
economic,
and the philosophical.
Yeah.
What's the philosophical fascism?
So when I talk about that, I'm kind of going like, fascism is, as a movement, I think philosophically is the notion that the world is an organic whole, or the social body is an organic whole, in which every part works together for the whole, with the brain or the head being the center, being basically the embodiment of the will of the people. And so it's the freedom of the state is more important than the freedom of the individual. The individual is represented by the state. And here's the irony, if there's a group of people, let's say the Jews, right? They're often the ones within fascism who are the people who...
Let's just pick one.
Is some group that you have to blame for it.
We'll call them the Jews.
Yeah, because and funnily enough, fascism doesn't always have to be anti-Semitic, but the most famous fascism of Germany was anti-Semitic, obviously.
Yeah.
So a group of people are seen as the cancer that is damaging the health of the body and have to be removed.
They have to go.
So for me, fascism is all about earth, organism, the people working as one, wholeness, completeness. This is, to be honest, why I'm very critical of the New Age, and because I see it as having a fascistic kind of
Let's
dimension.
back up. What? New Age
philosophy.
What's the other word? Is it New Thought or something like that? There's another word for the New Age movement, I think. The New Thought psychologies or something like that.
They might have rebranded.
Yeah, New Age got a little too New Agey for people. But why is that? Why? And give an example. And what is it? And what do you mean?
So for me, right, philosophically, and Hitler in Mein Kampf is always talking about organic wholeness, that we are.
Oh, I see the oneness.
Yeah, oneness.
Kumbaya. We can all get along.
And then the issue is, if you don't have that, which you don't in a society, then you have to create a scapegoat who you say, and because of this group of people, they're preventing this organic system from working. So then you persecute that group. And then the irony is that group is what holds the fascist community together, because it's the shared hatred of that group that holds the group. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if you ever got rid of the scapegoat, you would discover that your community is riven with conflict. So the conflict is covered over by your hatred of the scapegoat.
Yeah, they're the container.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why, by the way, in Russia, the kulaks were the scapegoat in Stalinism, and they were so successful, right? The kulaks were wealthy peasants who had owned certain things and had workers, and so they were being persecuted. But that's the problem, and they were so successful that there were fewer and fewer kulaks, but things weren't getting better, so they had to extend the definition of what a kulak was until it got to the point where really a kulak was someone who thought like a kulak or would think like a kulak if they were given the chance. In other words, you have to have an enemy in order to sustain the social whole. So I think that's always the dark side of fascism.
Who would be the enemy in your little society?
Yes, you have to have an enemy. Somebody. I saw there was Mitchell and Webb did one where the United Nations were having this problem. They realized they needed an enemy, and so they picked this guy called, I think it was Keith Chedman. He was a children's presenter in the 1990s, and they were like, well, we've just decided that he's the enemy,
he's the
and we're giving him 24 hours to hide, and then the whole of the United Nations is, we're going to find him, we're going to kill him.
Yes, and when we kill him, everything's
going to be good. So we really hope he can hide well, because
yes, please go hard.
We are unified in our hatred of this person. It's very good.
They're just geniuses.
That's why, by the way, fascism is so militaristic, because you always have either an enemy you're fighting or are on the verge of fighting, which keeps everybody together.
For us right now, I mean, we're such a huge country that I feel like everyone can kind of pick their own. And I mean, I'm a big fan of the.
You don't like immigrants?
That's what I was going to say. Illegal immigrants are kind of are 100% obviously a scapegoat for a huge portion of this country. But I also think that other people on, say, the left have made it into sometimes men, sometimes black people. It seems like different groups just have all their own little groups that they've decided that they need to hate for
Yeah.
some various reason. I saw a tweet from someone who, great, we're buds, and it was she tweeted something that was like, talking about how all presidents have been liars, and they've all lied. And I was like, heck yeah. I was like, she's getting it. Like, they're all they're all horrible. Great. Like, let's embrace that fact for a second instead of trying to prop up one or the other as being like a savior in some way. And then I clicked on it, and there was one of the replies, where they replied to the tweet, and it just was like, because men can't tell the truth. And I was like, I was like, I don't know. I'm not saying presidents should be the scapegoat, but I was like, it seems like you're making men out to be now the scapegoat. And don't get me wrong, I don't think men are perfect, but you get the idea. It was more and more just finding a group that, like, if only we didn't have men, then everything would be fine. And then you're like, I don't know, man, that seems kind of harsh.
Yeah. It's a structure like of hypochondria, where a hypochondriac, they believe they have an illness, and they think the illness is the problem, but it's what holds them together. While they have this illness, that's the reason for all of my anxieties, discontent. And then if they find out they have the illness, they can feel a little bit of relief, because they're going, oh, I do have the cancer, and I knew that's why I feel the discontent. But the idea is, if you're not a hypochondriac and you find out you have cancer, you're not libidinally invested in the cancer, so you can actually fight it. But if you're a hypochondriac and you kind of need the cancer, so you love what you hate. In other words, what you hate is what holds you together. That's when you're in this scapegoating mechanism.
Right. I feel like you can very easily figure out who your scapegoat is by just mentally going, who, when I see them, makes me irrationally emotional or angry in any way. Yes. And it's the same, which we've talked about, and I've mentioned his name, but I'll give snarky replies to folks like Ben Shapiro sometimes, because I can be a little bit of a jerk sometimes on the internet, and in life, and in my relationship, and in every way, and as a business owner, and but I'm like, what is it that I'm so bothered by in this other? And then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And then I can very quickly go, oh, that's what it is. That's what I'm projecting onto him, my own probably hyper Republican, hyper success oriented, logic and fact based mental gymnastics that I do, and then going, oh, he's so wrong, because I'm probably way too emotional in my political.
It's incredible how much we all project as well. Like, often the people that we hate most, there's some dimension of them that is a disavowed part of ourselves, and it might be the person's fame, it might be the person's views, but it's funny, like, if you get, I used to do this when I was more in the religious world, like 25 years ago, but if you get someone who's really anti-religion, for example, it's easy to get them to convert them, because they're anti it, so you know that they're actually invested unconsciously in it, and so it's very easy to change. Is it people who are indifferent are the ones who are harder to change? Because when you're really against something, there is generally some dimension of yourself in what you're hating, and until you can work that out, then you'll be invested in that enemy. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that Lacan said, I think we've used this quote before, but he said, even if your partner's cheating on you, your jealousy can still be pathological. So in other words, you think your partner's cheating on you, and you're thinking about it, and you're obsessed by it, and then you find out you're right. It doesn't mean that you're not paranoid and pathologically jealous. It just means you're pathologically jealous and right. So
I said this in the beginning of the podcast.
What's that?
I said I attributed it to Freud, but I said paranoid and your wife can still be cheating on you.
That's the one. Yep.
But I got it wrong. I got both the quote wrong and he said it wrong.
That is the story of this podcast.
Yes, it is. Yep, but also, I got everything wrong. But I knew.
But it was in there.
I got it. It's somewhere. So say that again, though, because I got distracted by.
So, like, the worst thing is actually, if you've got an enemy who is actually a bad leader, then you can hide the pathological dimension of your hatred in the truth. So you can So it's funny, like, if you're
it's like Trump can be a bad president, and you can not be up at night freaking out because Trump's in the White House, or
libidinally enjoying the dislike,
right? I 100% enjoy it. Like, I mean, it's like, so fun. It's like a sick sense of fun.
Although you know me, man, my worries are on all sides at the moment.
They are, dude. We are
I have a
beyond
friend-
screwed in
I-
both directions. It's crazy.
I have a friend. You'll be like this, who was approached indirectly by one of Biden's advisors to see if they could get my friend to endorse Biden, who is a religious leader. We're like, that's not allowed, isn't it? I thought past religious leaders aren't allowed to endorse. And we're like, oh, that's really underhanded. And they're not doing it directly so that they can't be caught. Nothing can be done. So it's through somebody and it's an indirect thing. And we're like, that's just, I don't know.
I mean,
It's
I want more
underhanded.
details on it. I want to know every detail about that. We can fill me in when this is over, because I'm curious who you're talking about. I got some ideas on who you're talking about, but I want to see receipts, but there aren't. They buried their trail. Made sure they had no paper trail. But yeah, man. I mean, for sure. This is. I think we're pretty good at establishing that there's a pessimistic view of pretty much both parties, and I think if that hasn't been made abundantly clear in the past year that neither of these parties are necessarily great, then I don't know. It's very strange to me when you see people that are like Biden. And I'm like, really?
Yeah. Not many,
You're not. You're lying. You can't. I can tell you're not really excited about it. But anyway, who cares?
But you know what? You brought this topic up because you're right. It's like there's a huge amount of discontent, alienation. There's a huge amount of financial instability, lack of social mobility. All of this has been happening for a long time, and now what we're seeing is potentially on all sides lack of the confidence in democracy, and we're seeing more authoritarianism, more identitarianism, and we're seeing moves towards socialism, nationalism, and also then moves towards kind of extreme forms, that's called Stalinism and fascism. Like this is all, we are living in a moment where all of that is happening.
It's all
right now.
up for grabs.
It's all up for grabs.
It's intense, yeah, and the fear that people have, and I think the sense of isolation is what worries me more than anything. It's the people are really scared, and people are, I think, in their fear, latching onto words for either good or bad that they have no real knowledge of. At least, I mean, maybe I'm projecting onto them, but I feel very like it's like you're steeped in these words like a frog in a pot, and then you like think when you hop out that you have the definitions, but then you realize one day that you've never actually thought about what any of this means, and then you Google it and you're like, okay, that kind of sounds like what I thought it was a little, but it almost robs, like I feel like talking about this in a good way robs the words of their power a little, to just be like, this is what this is. This isn't someone breaking down your door with like a gun and taking all your belongings and then giving them to everyone else. Like this is simply what this idea is. And that's it. That's why I think it's useful to be doing this kind of thing, you know. And there's lots of good stuff on YouTube. There's more people consuming intellectual content, but there is a huge amount of people on all sides just being sucked in by propaganda. I don't get involved in most news and that stuff because I feel it myself. Anything that you're watching that makes you feel a hatred or a kind of like it really gets your passions going, I'm a bit nervous about, because I'm a big believer in rational reflection, and that's harder and harder to do because so much is designed to make you angry. So much is designed to, it really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
to stop you thinking, to override that with violence, and that is fascistic. Like, so Mussolini is the whole thing of democracy and debate and all of that. No, what you do is if you think something is wrong, you violently, try to overturn the government. And if you succeed, you set up your institution, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, someone's going to put a gun to your head.
And then you're dead, yeah.
Yeah.
And who's going to fight? Yeah, I mean, there's such a sense of hopelessness that's like, no one's going to... I mean, I say that people are fighting and they're doing their thing. But it's, it's... We'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. I think the most interesting thing, a good litmus test, I guess, for deciding whether or not you're watching something that is actually propaganda is to just figure out how often they say that they might be responsible for some of it. Like if you watch CNN, if you watch Fox News, they are it's all finger pointing. Like it is 100% the other party is to blame, the other person is to blame. And I watched a little bit of Hannity last night after it was right after the story of Trump on record saying that he purposefully downplayed the virus because blah blah blah.
I read this. We all knew that. I thought that wasn't a secret.
Everyone knew.
Anyway, but keep going. I saw that. Thought it was a non-news event. But anyway.
Yeah, and then all those. This is impeachable. I'm thinking, okay, all right, whatever. But I wanted to hear what he had to say. So in good form, Donald Trump went on a good, unbiased interviewer's show named Sean Hannity, and I was watching the monologue because I thought maybe he'd appear in the first part of the hour, and Hannity was just like going off on Biden, and I was like, Biden, keep it on Biden. I could just like, as long as you talk about Biden, you don't have to talk about Trump. Stay on the offense, and it's just theater. It's pure, just like look over here, and it's the same thing on CNN and worse on MSNBC where they're like, this is unbelievable, and they're so. I don't know how they have energy to even be that emotionally upset that all these anchors are 100% of the time. I guess it's why they're millionaires, because they get paid to just go. What.
Yeah, no, it's designed to keep you at that level. But I'm not even against. I don't know these people, but I'm not against them. I just think structure. Whenever one is engaging in politics, you have to be a structuralist, which means you're not thinking about the intentionality and all of that. You're kind of looking at underlying structures. What works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
You don't know people's intentions. Like, I don't know if anybody, if they're authentic or inauthentic, and I don't mind. Now, if they were my friend, I care about it.
Right.
When you're a friend to somebody, you care whether they're being authentic or inauthentic.
I mean, I want them to be authentic.
Yeah.
I want them to be a good, decent human being.
Oh, no, but authentic people can be idiots.
Right, but I want someone who can set an example on a very spiritual level, a very mascot level of like.
No, see, I think that's the thing I notice about Americans. You want your leaders to be authentic. Like in the UK, we don't vote for leaders. We vote for parties, because you go like, yeah, your leader can be ugly, they can be short, they can be lack of charisma. Nobody cares. It's not about being looking like a movie star or anything like that. It's just you vote for a party, and you don't vote for a leader, because you go like, the leader is just the figurehead of the party.
Right, but what happens when the other party that you don't, structurally speaking, agree with gets like a really bombastic, very charismatic leader, and then consistently wipes out the structurally speaking better party, because they're playing a game. Like, they're playing the game that your party isn't playing.
Well, no, it's slightly different.
You have to play that.
But it's slightly different because the whole structure is different. Like, although you have leaders, the whole thing, like, all the debates you do and all of that, it's a bit different. But you still do get, like, Tony Blair was a very charismatic leader in the UK, and partly that definitely galvanized New Labour. And he was, he's a very, like, he was very involved in the Iraq War. He wasn't good, but he was authentic and fun and charismatic and
real,
largely seen as probably not a good leader.
I agree with what you're saying, though, and I think it's a great way to go about doing politics, is just to go what works and then forget everything else and just vote. Don't watch the interviews, don't watch the whatever. Just go, your policy. This policy's been proven to work. This policy's been proven to not work. I'm voting for who's doing this policy. Don't even
the actions and the symptoms, and you watch those, and
exactly, and then you're good to go. But it's almost like, how cool would it be if one term we just did blind elections, like you couldn't see the person. They were just like, here's the Republican one, we're not going to tell you his name, he's in a box somewhere, and this is what his stances are, and these are what the other people's stances are. They don't get a chance to be charismatic and charming and real and authentic. They're just there, and then you vote for the issues and what would actually work. What a beautiful world that would be. That's my society.
Very good. I like that. What would we call that?
It's called Elliott, though.
Yeah.
That's so dumb. Any other thoughts on fascism?
No, I mean, I think so. Like, we talked about the kind of the psychological dimension, and I mean, they have done studies, and like at certain times, whenever people are tense, we tend towards design an authoritarian leader. We tend towards nationalism. So I think we covered all of that. I don't know. It's maybe a short episode today. I don't think we've been talking for that long.
I don't think we need to hit fascism over the head too much. People can Google it. I think it still doesn't sound like a good thing. Yeah, maybe we stay away from it for a little bit. Do you think we're heading there? Where do you see us in 10 years?
Like I don't see it go in that direction, but I do think that there'll be a greater fight between the tankies and the fascists. At the moment, that's what I'm seeing, and then I don't know what's going to happen. And I could see and I am worried that like how much do I say? Like I'm worried that some of what's going on at the moment is a last-ditch attempt by some capitalist organizations to prop themselves up and remain in power, and they are using the current situation in order to do that. And so, it could lead to a very low-intensity civil war.
I don't think that's controversial.
Yeah, I know. Okay, that's good.
Low-intensity civil war, yeah. I think that's probably down the pipeline. In the meantime, though, I've seen in the past week 2 articles. One was the coast, the ice caps, is melting according to the worst case scenario models that they had made, whatever that means. And then the other one was from the WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation.
Oh, not the wrestlers?
Not the wrestlers,
okay.
But wrestlers are also in danger.
Okay.
COVID is very scary. They're too close. That's dumb. But the wildlife also, they're just like, these species are getting decimated at a rate that is like irreversible. And I'm like,
so on a positive note, it might all be finished before we destroy ourselves.
That's kind of, it's actually, I'm like, I mean, I know every generation feels like their generation's going to be the last one. And I think there will be some that survive and all that. But yeah, it certainly feels like some kind of book is closing.
I mean, it's exciting time. Like all I'm trying to do is try to figure out, is this a moment where a certain socioeconomic system might be giving way? And, what's that going to look like? But I don't know. Like my worry is, so China is a kind of state-sponsored capitalism. Yeah. It's not a communist. The worry is that actually the next iteration is not late-stage capital, but state-sponsored capitalism, and which means a weakening of democracy, strengthening of state, and those are dangers. I think those are dangers. That what I want to see is young people set up cooperatives, local businesses, and kind of like do that, and then the work that I do, which is helping people to be freed from this kind of like dream of having everything that actually I think leads to economic and social destruction.
And psychological destruction.
Psychological destruction, yeah. So those two things
I love
think
that.
would be good.
That's great. I think we got to come up with a different word than co-op. When I hear co-op, I think of somebody who's all their clothes are made out of hemp.
Oh.
Which I think is cool. But co-ops that are like...
Cool.
Like
little
co-ops.
coffee shops,
Cool-ops.
Breweries, cool-ops.
Yeah. But yeah, you want a hipster paradise.
Yes.
I'm okay with that. That wouldn't be that bad. And still some big movie theaters. All right, man. Well, this has been wonderful. I don't really have any final thoughts except fascism bad and be kind to other people.
Yeah. Democracy good.
Democracy good.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.